Now, what we're saying is let's put in this little machine, right? A whole host of reasons we want to use a smaller machine. So you do.
Right.
You bring this thing in, it's a little smaller, and you're only making contact with this arc on the cable. So now you've reduced the amount of traction you can impose on that cable, right? Well, how do we compensate for that?
Sure.
Let's change the groove profile. Let's come in with a real aggressive V groove that'll really bite on the cable and still deliver the same traction we need in this original hoistway in mod.
Right.
Right? Well, now you're wearing the cable much faster. You're wearing the drive shift much faster. Your new requirement is to harden that traction shift. You might even then go to a 2-to-1 arrangement, and then you're essentially doubling all those bends. An outsider might just say, great, new machine, smaller footprint, easy to install, but there's downstream consequences of doing so.
Sure.
That doesn't mean it's bad, but when a lot of conversations now hover around, rope life. How come I'm only getting 2 years or 5 years out of this cable when last time we changed them, they went for 20 years? I think that's that should be part of the conversation, or at least the context in which people talk about rope life and shiv life for that matter. It's an incredibly consequential topic. And if that's not part of the conversation with the building owner, then you get that mismatch in expectations. If that expectation were set at the outset, maybe that wouldn't be a surprise to anyone.
Hello and welcome to the Elevator Careers podcast, brought to you by the Allred Group. I'm your host, Matt Allred. When talent is mission critical, call the Allred Group. With industry expertise, top talent, and exceptional customer service, you need the Allred Group on your side. Your priority is our priority. Call now, 404-890-0445. Today's guest is Carlos Escobar, traction elevator aficionado with Hyperion Solutions. Carlos grew up in a machine shop surrounded by craftsmen who could turn raw metal into solutions, and that mindset still drives everything he does today. Carlos has spent his career tackling the toughest elevator modernization challenges and preserving century-old machines. More recently, he's been thinking deeply about where AI, training, and the future of the trades are headed next. Carlos, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I've enjoyed previous conversations. I'm excited to dig a little deeper today, and wanted to start kind of at the beginning. I mean, you essentially grew up in a machine shop, right, and built your career around traction equipment. Tell me a little bit about those kind of early days, kind of being hands-on in that environment and how that shaped who you are.
Well, I mean, I genuinely grew up in a machine shop from childhood, and I was surrounded by some great craftsmen, some folks that could turn a block of metal into just about anything you could imagine. And I think just being surrounded by that can-do attitude and folks with that deep skill set,
Sure.
that they could use the equipment around them and think through complex repairs or even just creative projects, I think that stayed with me. I think my entire career is built around not the cookie cutter problems, but looking for what's difficult to solve and then figuring out how to stack the pieces together to get to a positive outcome. So, and then the obvious too, right? Just being in a machine shop and being surrounded by the milling machines and the lathes and the gear hobbers. It's just fun to be exposed to all the possible ways that you can produce something.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's part of what's going through my mind is you see so many possibilities, right? It's like, what? The lathe can do that?
Sure.
Well, then I have 16 other ideas now that I can create. And who knows, maybe you were building some of your own tools at some point or just experimenting with, who knows what.
Absolutely. There's a fun story, a guy that, if we talk about folks that shaped my career, there's a guy, Paul Moore. We were building this complicated setup to be able to speed test governors, right? To figure out when they were going to trip and not. We were repairing jaws. And anyway, none of that's important, but it was me and a group of machinists huddled around this thing and trying to figure out, well, how do we get this thing how do we get the RPMs up high enough to be able to test some of these trip speeds on these different, and we were coming up with different belt diameters to move belts on. And Paul Moore comes in and he just says, you could just hook an angle grinder to that thing and those things run up at 1,800
just wind it up
RPMs, and just it was like this simple solution to this problem that was taking 4 of us a half day's worth of work.
Right.
So yeah, being exposed to what's possible, it always kind of drives you to find solutions.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And inspires you that, hey, there always is a solution, right? I mean, I'm sure that every problem that came before you, it's like, okay, there is a solution. It might take us a week or two, but
Yeah.
let's figure out what it is.
Yep. Absolutely.
Awesome. Awesome. And I mean, you told me that you've worked on some of the oldest elevator machines that are still operating. What fascinates you most about legacy equipment from the 40s, 50s, 60s, or
That they've been doing their job sometimes for a century,
that's amazing.
reliably doing what they were intended to do. Not a whole lot more, no
Sure.
less, but they do their job for many, many, many decades. I love the fact that they're repairable. They were built before we could really dial in all the constraints and before CAD and everything, where you could engineer something to the tiniest, slimmest margin of acceptable performance. It's a time when a couple guys would say, yeah, that meets all the requirements. Well, let's just add another half inch of material just to be sure.
Just to make
And you
sure.
know what? That half inch of material is what allows people like me to go back and,
Sure.
repair and rehabilitate some of that old equipment. So, and just the craftsmanship, the uniqueness of it,
Sure.
modern stuff, it's got its place. And I'm not like a anti new equipment, but every machine looks the same. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no style to them, right? I mean, you can identify you can look at a Watson or an ABC or a Houghton, and the brand is expressed in the
Right.
product. There's kind of an artistic beauty to them that I think is kind of lacking. Now we're pretty purpose built.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a good point. I mean, it's in a way, maybe that same kind of appreciation when you see a 57 Chevrolet drive by. It's like, hey,
Yes,
there's
yes,
something special about that. And not everybody gets to see a 1957 elevator machine. It's like, okay.
yeah, and there is some. It's not gatekeeping per se, right? But there is a small club of people, I guess you would say. We find each other at trade shows and everything, and it's like a game to pull up the most obscure machine ever, and make sure that no one else but the tiniest handful of people can identify it, and that's fun. That's a fun
Yeah,
little game to play with it too.
that's funny. I mean, it's a little bit like, yeah, fine wines, right? You kind of got to know what
Yeah.
you're what you're
Yes.
looking at, and a lot of people don't, right? I've got a friend that he loves obscure opera music, and I don't know how
Right. Right. You
to
need the taste
appreciate
for it,
that.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
very cool. So you mentioned the newer stuff, right? And newer is cool and often seen as better,
Yes.
but what would you say the new stuff can learn from the older machines? I mean, you talked a little bit about the tolerances and some of that stuff.
They've probably learned all the technical lessons I think that you can from the older equipment generally. I think we moved away from, and the market requires something different of modern machines, right? I mean, the efficiency and the footprint and the ease of installation, and probably reducing some of the assemblies, or at least the more complex parts of those machines, to components that are swappable, right?
Sure, sure. A little more modular-ish, it sounds like.
Yeah, and that all makes sense, and I think it's we're marching in the right direction. But I think in doing so, you eliminate the need for folks to have just the underlying understanding of how some of these systems interact or why. When you can't repair or repour a pedestal bearing, you would never have to think about why the load on the ship side of a gearbox might be causing asymmetric wear. And you don't have to reason through all the steps that you might otherwise have to do, like you once did. Now it's just, hey, there's a bearing noise here. Entire gearbox gets swapped in most cases now. So I think that economically, right, the economics of buying parts and elevators and machinery and everything maybe makes sense, but I think it's eliminated the need for a lot of the more underlying technical expertise.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can see that. Yeah, if it's just to, swap it out, well, then you don't get your hands in it. And it's a little bit like, more classic automobiles. You used to see a lot more people climbing under the hood and
Yeah,
working on stuff. And now it's,
you
kind of
can't.
an engineered away. It's like now you can't touch that anymore.
Right, right. It's all housed in this little box somewhere, and swap it out, rewire it in, and you're done.
Yep. Yep. That's interesting. And obviously talking about, highly customized mod challenges, it feels like maybe that's part of what just the complex elevator modernization project probably intrigues in the same way as kind of what I was getting at is that you have a chance to almost like a puzzle, right? Not
It's a
handed to
great
you.
way to put it. I mean, it's exactly that. My time at Titan, right? I mean, we were this bespoke small shop that tried to take on kind of the tougher challenges. We were never built to compete with folks that were sourcing overseas or whatnot. I mean, it was just the scale of that wasn't what we went for. But it was always the difficult mods where you had to preserve these really specific rope drops or a basement machine with some overhead shivs that just had to be a particular diameter or width or rope spacing or cantilevered underslung car frame or something. Just the most difficult projects were the ones that you could work on for a couple days, reason through, and come up with a plan or a way to either adapt what was there or reproduce what existed 70 years ago. And that pulls in from so many parts of the shop, right? I mean, you're talking to the engineering crew, and then the welding team, and everyone's huddled frequently to figure out how to get through one of those mods. And at the end of the day, I don't know if the customer knows that. They might not. I don't know if they know how much we enjoy working on that, and maybe that's something we should work towards. But yeah, those are the best. The other stuff,
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I just want to ask, how does it feel as a team to kind of bang your heads against this project for a few days and come up with a plan? I mean, it almost sounds military-esque to say, hey, we've got to get in, save the princess, get her out of the castle, over the
yeah.
wall, and not hurt anybody.
God, this is a fun. It's a lot less. It's anticlimactic, right? Because that's just like Tuesday. I mean, it's the rush of accomplishing it.
Right.
Getting it out the door on time or delivering it at 5 a.m. or whatever it is, right? I mean, you cross that threshold, you cross the finish line, and then it's Wednesday, and do it all over
You do it
again.
again.
There's no real, and there probably should be, right? More of a debrief on how to. It's the challenge of the day, right? How do you document the workflow to ensure that you're consistently delivering the same result, right? But in reality, it's not that climactic, right? Tuesday happens, then Wednesday, and you just do it all over
yeah.
again.
I mean, if you're doing it every day, maybe it's like, when do you take time to celebrate and do high fives and go, dude, you really came through for
Yeah,
me on that,
I don't know. That's a really interesting insight and something that I'll bounce around with the crew and just say, hey, we should celebrate some of these wins a little more often because we just, it's the normal course of business.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and again, sounds like you got complex projects all the time. And when do you celebrate, right? It's like, well, we're just going to do it again tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the routine, right? But it's nice that they come in fresh every day and there's something new to look at and
Yeah,
another problem to work through. And in the moment it's a little heated and it's a little fast, and I need this answer and I got to get this response out and I got to figure out this dimension and I'm missing this piece of data. But somehow it all comes together at the end.
for sure. Yeah. I mean, it seems like it'd be really gratifying to take on big challenges, to win, to move to the next one. And that's why I kind of got the idea of, when do you celebrate, right? But yeah, uh, I'm sure you'll come up with something if you haven't
Yeah,
already.
I'll work on that. That'll be Thursday.
Well, there you go. There you go.
Right.
So I'm just, for people outside the trade who honestly, a little bit like myself, I've not been on a car top, right? I learn about these things and learn how to even pronounce them from people that I talk to, right? But from somebody outside the trade, to hear about ropes and shivs and grooves and traction, they may not have a concept for that. But why would you say well, those are all a bigger deal than most people realize? I mean, obviously that's the kind of the heart and soul of what makes it go, right?
Yeah, it ties into the modern equipment and what we're requiring of it, what the building expectation is when you remove these massive legacy machines that had these, 36, 40-inch drive shifts. And, if you could imagine, they were able to keep contact with a rope, a cable, for this percentage of the drive shift and produce traction over that entire radius, right? That entire arc. Now, what we're saying is let's put in this little machine, right? We want to save footprint, floor space. We want to make it easy to install. We don't want to have to, for a whole host of reasons, we want to use this smaller machine. So you bring this thing in. It's a little smaller or a little shorter, and you're only making contact with this arc on the cable. So now you've reduced the amount of traction you can impose on that cable, the amount that you can actually lift, right? Well, how do we compensate for that? Then we say, well, let's change the groove geometry. Let's change a groove profile. And so someone says, all right, let's come in with a real aggressive V groove that'll really bite on the cable and still deliver the same traction we need in this original hoistway in a mod, right? Well, now you're wearing the cable much faster. You're wearing the drive shift much faster. Your new requirement is to harden that traction shift.
Well, if it's smaller, you're bending it at a tighter angle, right? Which has to affect the longevity.
And then, you might even then go to a 2-to-1 arrangement, and then you're essentially doubling all those bends. And so I think an outsider might just say, great, new machine, smaller footprint, easy to install, but there's downstream consequences of doing so.
Sure.
That doesn't mean it's bad, but when a lot of conversations now hover around, rope life and how come I'm only getting 2 years or 5 years out of this cable when, last time we changed them, they went for 20 years. And there's a lot of hearsay, and I don't know that all of it is true, but, I think that should be part of the conversation, or at least the context in which people talk about rope life and shiv life for that matter. There's real consequences to what size we produce these drive shivs at, how we engineer the rope groove, how we deliver traction. So it's an incredibly consequential topic.
Sure. Well, and it has to all be weighed at the beginning. I mean, I did talk to a rope expert once, and he was just telling me that, when you get to the V groove, that you've dramatically decreased the life of your rope. So you just need to know that you're going to have to replace it in 3 to 5 years instead of 20 to 30.
And if that's not part of the conversation with the building owner, typically through the consultant or even directly from the contractor, but then you get that mismatch in expectations. And someone says, hey, I just installed this brand new elevator, and how come I'm changing ropes every 3 years, and whose responsibility is it? Well, if that expectation were set at the outset, maybe that wouldn't be a surprise to anyone.
Yeah. I mean, if they know that they're trading, rope replacements for a greener machine and it's smaller, easier to install, then okay, no big deal.
That's right. As long as it's documented and someone knows what they're agreeing to, then it's fine.
Yep. Agreed. Well, let's talk a little bit about AI right now. Obviously, that was part of our previous conversations, and obviously it's everywhere. You can't not talk about it seems like. But why do you think AI will become such a powerful tool for training and supporting elevator mechanics, especially as we're talking about older machines and just kind of that knowledge that once it retires, it's gone?
Geez, and I'm probably one of those people that's going down this rabbit hole right now and really trying to wrap my head around what is possible. And obviously, I'm far from bleeding edge with it, but it is remarkable to me how easily it can break down those moats, that gate-kept expertise that used to exist in people that were around. I want to call them the old timers, right? I mean, the folks that shaped me in the machine shop, my old man, of course, and then Paul Moore and all these pillars that, at least of the New York market, these folks had tremendous expertise. Most of them are gone or retired. Well, how do we not only just, database that, document it, but then make it reasonably available, at people's fingertips? And nothing could possibly compare to AI. Its ability to process such vast amounts of data, contextualized, and then present it to people in any individualized format that makes the most sense for them. I mean, that connection is incredibly powerful. That's like the challenge, right? How do we turn what we remember, check a gearbox to make sure it doesn't exceed 200 degrees? Well, where did that come from? Where's the technical standard that you relate to know that, or to be able to defend that position? It's like an impossible question to answer, right? How do I think it'll change? I mean, it democratizes that expertise in a way that somebody's going to figure out how to put it in people's hands.
Well, and it's almost like they have to, right? Because you can't, once it retires, it's gone. And so it's almost like you need to get every old retiring machinist and have them sit with an AI agent for however many hours and try to glean everything they ever knew and go through every install. And then maybe there's a way to try to force feed that into the next generation and say, hey, learn all this.
Well, imagine that 4-year veteran of the industry right in your pocket on a phone. Right next to you when you're turning wrenches or you have a question, or I don't think that's that far away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they've already got the smart glasses or something where you can look at something. And so if they're talking to you the whole time, right? And you're standing in a machine room. Maybe that's the ideal AI assistant. You can start relaying, or you can ask it questions, or
All of it. I mean, this is like trying to figure out what's on the other side of the edge of the universe, right? I mean, we don't know what we don't know. It's unbelievably powerful, and if
yeah.
folks start infusing their normal workflows with it, I can accelerate, right? It's exponential even.
Mhm.
You're going to quickly find out that the edges of this system are way further than somebody that thought that, whatever, Copilot or ChatGPT was just a glorified Google search.
Sure.
I think you're quickly going to find that it's far more powerful than that.
It feels like it's coming at a time when we really need it, right? A lot of baby boomers, a lot of knowledge going out the door. How do we get the next group ready to go? I mean, this might be a silly question, but where are machinists trained these days? Like a lot of them were trained in the field, hands-on, right?
Any kind of vocational training, I mean, which is a shame, right? That it doesn't really exactly exist in a lot of like high school environments anymore. But vocational schools, tech schools, that kind of thing. Sometimes you think it's either the guy or woman turning the wrench, doing the work on the tools. That's incredibly difficult to replace or change. Everything in the middle between them and strategy feels like it's at risk. But yeah, where do those machinists come from? I mean, they're homegrown. A lot of guys at Titan, for example. I mean, you have folks that are 15, 20-year tenured people on those machines. It'd be real challenging to replace them, or for anyone with a manufacturing facility, certainly domestically, to replace that skill set. I would probably turn to a guy like you, Matt, and say, we need 20 more machinists. I mean, it's difficult. It's a tall order.
Right, right. Well, and it's almost, I mean, the question that comes to mind is, are they training somebody, right? Is there somebody standing right next to them? But then could be a headcount issue, and maybe this person doesn't want to learn this skill. And
well, I mean, to your point, I mean, about AI and the glasses. I mean, there are folks working on AI-enabled glasses that will literally depict workflows for you, or go no-go gauges, or tee up the next jig or fixture that you need to move the particular job that you're working on to. I mean,
Right.
there are ways of helping to accelerate training, and I think that's kind of the next thing that it's not the next thing. We should be exploring that now immediately.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, tell me, what do you think great training should look like, now and into the next 10 years?
I definitely don't have the right answer for this, but I think the reliance on that experiential training, right? The helper, that kind of like prescribed system where you would put in, 2 or 5 years or something working under somebody. I've heard that my entire career, and it's gotten us to this point, and we're still asking for more. So that's obviously not enough, right? I think because we're living through this period of, sure, social media has a place in this, but who hasn't tried to fix something just looking for it on YouTube? I mean, content is pervasive. It's everywhere.
It is huge. Yeah.
So why aren't we using that platform more frequently? And there's obviously folks that, you and I probably, we see, through LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever, and you see the content. I would love for that to become, more long form.
Yeah.
I think it would be really interesting to support some folks in the industry to start developing more long form training,
right?
That's that accessible, right, and exciting too, right? I mean, there's some folks just posting pictures of old machine rooms, and they've got tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people watching and following. There's interest in this stuff. Well, let's pivot from that. Let's turn it into an educational opportunity.
Yeah. Take it up a notch, right? I mean, who hasn't looked up a YouTube video to fix their lawnmower or replace a headlight? I mean,
right.
And yet, to your point, right, this is certainly a bigger process. It's bigger. Obviously, you got to have a license to even be in there. So there's a lot more to it, but why not use media? Use what we have at our disposal. That's what I'm hearing.
Or, champion it internally. Mm-hmm. I mean, ourselves, whether it's Hyperion or Titan directly, or whomever. I mean, you have a corporate sponsor to champion the idea of developing internal content for training and push that, and really, put it in the hands of everyone in your organizations.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a good
all the
point.
way from the inside sales team, all the way to the technician, right?
It's brilliant. Yeah. I mean, there's it does feel like the days of one-on-one mentorship is a little bit limited when people, you know, are retiring faster than they're coming in. And so it almost becomes bigger, a bigger need for mentorship. And maybe they can use, like you say, videos or long form to really reach more people. I mean, and one thing that I hear a lot that is spoken of really positively is the impact of mentors, right? Having somebody that you can go to that can inspire confidence, that can kind of give you that feedback. And you had mentioned one of yours earlier. Who are some of the other people you felt like really took an interest in you and helped shape your career?
Oh God, I mean, there's so many, and most of them are retired or kind of gone at this point. It would be a shame if I didn't mention my old man, also named Carlos Escobar. I mean, that guy, um, he wasn't the easiest teacher. He allowed you to fail and made you kind of live with the consequence of your failures. But it was hard lessons learned. But God, I mean, I don't know if there's a better machinist out there. And I think he did what he loved, right? He wanted to be first one in, last one out, and perform the duty, right? He wanted to be on the lathe, and nobody could accuse him of lacking confidence in himself. I mean, that's a man that when he put his mind to something, he got it done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, from what you're saying, it sounds like he was wired to just move fast, experiment, solve problems, be very, very hands-on. And how
Yes.
would you say that mindset served him throughout his career?
I think it's instilled in me, and it's this. You want to get to the solution quickly. I mean, of course, you kind of break and stumble, and you make mistakes along the way. I guess you could say that if you're failing with frequency, you're also learning at an accelerated rate too, right? So, if you're always afraid to make that choice, or you're relying on committee decision making, or a half dozen people have to support your direction, and that slows you down. You only ever see the successes because it's been so curated and perfected before you actually execute. I don't know that it's not the proudest thing to make a ton of mistakes, but you sure learn a lot from them.
I mean, I think there's value. And I can't remember off the top of my head the name. I think it was a business book I was reading, but it talked about investing in failure, right? And just going after it and learning as much as you can. And it talked about a gentleman who, I think it was Kung Fu or something, some martial art, where he purposely went to get destroyed by the
Yeah.
strongest person. And eventually, after getting, thrown to the ground many, many times, he actually figured it out. So there
Yeah.
is value in just, again, they call it investing in failure, right? Going after whatever is going to kick your butt. And
Yeah, maybe I should read that book. I don't know. Maybe
I'll need
that'll.
to dig it up and email you. Yeah, I can't remember what it's called. I mean, I have said to my kids, and they always want to win, right? Whether they're playing soccer or pickleball or tennis, and oh, I didn't win. I'm like, you learn so much more from losing than
Yeah.
you ever do by winning. You
Yeah.
know, pick a strong opponent, go up against them, and if you lose a few times, well, eventually you're gonna beat them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's certainly it's definitely my I'm programmed for it. My old man was. Yeah, that's something to think about. I'm going to pick up that book.
Sounds good. Well, when you look ahead 15 to 20 years, what excites you most about the future of the industry?
I think that it's certainly the infusion of AI into everything. I mean, that's kind of where my head is at. Candidly, probably only for the last 2 or 3 months. And I think that's just when that kind of like that fever pitch of ability or capability for it kind of reached me. But I'm interested to see how we can diffuse or propagate that expertise or make it more accessible to everyone from top of organizations all the way on down. And there's these silos of expertise, right? And every OEM has one, and every moderately sized organization has that team that they just know, right? You know who to call. If you call them, they know the code by heart. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that evolves when these natural silos that we've been working it with or outside of sometimes, when that all breaks down, what's it going to look like when any one of us are experts, subject matter experts in anything we're looking at? I think that's going to be remarkable.
Yeah. Well, let's end with this one, and that is, what advice would you give to somebody who's just starting out, or maybe brand new to the industry, Obviously, there's a lot of moving parts and pieces, but what would you say to them?
I would say participate. Get out there, be part of the trade organizations, the regional ones, not just the NAAC, of course, is a wonderful organization, but even the regional stuff, the folks out in Chicago or Boston that I'm a part of, or ECNY in New York, Florida. Get out there, shake hands, say hello to folks. I think that from my perspective, the kind of old timers, they want to share their expertise, and none of them want to retire and then look back at a career that they took with them. They want to leave legacies. So get yourself out there, shake some hands, say hello to people, put a smile on, and you're likely to be surprised at how welcoming the industry can be to you.
Yeah, I think that's perfect advice. And back to mentorship, right? I think that's a lot of people want to mentor, and they don't have to be, you don't have to be standing at the lathe in order to be taught
Yeah.
and to learn lessons. And so, yeah, getting out, shaking hands, getting to know people makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Carlos, thank you so much for being with me today. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Elevator Careers Podcast, sponsored by the Allred Group, a leader in elevator industry recruiting. Please visit our YouTube channel at Elevator Careers or check us out online at elevatorcareers.net. Please like and subscribe, and until next time, stay safe.